Zola walks into the Haruma estate dinner thinking it will be a quiet night of laughter and stories. The chandeliers glow. Glasses clink. Then the mood shifts. Her mother asks her to sit. Her father clears his throat. Uncles and aunties lean in. They tell her it is time to help the family. They say Kato's startup is drowning and only she can save it. She smiles politely and says she is proud of Kato but her company is her life. Their faces harden. Words turn sharp. They say she must sell her thriving logistics firm and wire the money this week. They call it a family decision. Zola's chest tightens. She looks to Kato for honesty. He will not meet her eyes. An aunt whispers that family is everything. An uncle says good daughters sacrifice. Her father reminds her who paid her school fees. Her mother says a woman is blessed when she keeps the family together. Zola hears the music in the next room, soft and fake. She thinks of the years she slept in warehouses and rode trucks at dawn to build her business. She thinks of every payroll she protected when markets shook. She asks for Kato's plan. He waves a folder and says the details are simple. The room closes in. Zola realizes this is not a request. It is an ultimatum. If she says no, she becomes the selfish one. If she says yes, she loses her dream. She inhales, lifts her chin, and chooses silence over surrender. Kato returns to the table with a smile that is almost a smirk and places a neat stack of papers in front of Zola. He calls it a simple bridge agreement. He says it is only for a few months, just until his startup gets fresh funding. He promises she will keep control, and that everything is temporary. The room relaxes as if the matter is already settled. Her mother gives a soft nod. Her father checks his watch. An aunt starts praising Kato's vision. Zola does not touch the pen. She lifts the first page and reads. She traces each line with her finger, slow and careful. The contract says she will transfer her company into a holding vehicle for efficiency. It says she stays as CEO. It says the board will protect her. It says the transfer is reversible whenever she wishes. The words feel like warm tea on a cold night. Then Zola finds a sentence that is shy and quiet, hiding at the bottom of a page. It refers to an appendix that is not in the stack. She asks for it. Kato says it is standard and not important. She asks again. He shrugs and tells her to trust him. Her mother squeezes her wrist and tells her to sign, because time is moving. The fine print says that once the transfer is made, the holding vehicle can issue new shares without her consent. It says the board can be replaced by a majority vote from temporary trustees. It says those trustees are named today by the initiating party, which means Kato. It says the transfer is permanent unless reversed by all trustees and all investors. In real life, that means never. Zola's hands feel cold. She asks Kato to explain. He calls it a technical fix. He says everyone does this. He says she worries too much. Her father adds that lawyers make things sound scary. An aunt says she is reading too deeply. Zola keeps reading. Her mother leans close and whispers that family comes first, even before dreams. Her father says they raised her to be brave, and this is bravery. A cousin jokes that the paper is just a formality. Two uncles nod together like a door closing. Zola looks around the table and sees only pressure. She sees the years of quiet comments about how her success should belong to everyone. She remembers early mornings in dusty depots, and nights when she counted every shilling to make payroll. She thinks of the drivers who trust her, the customers who wait for her trucks, the teams who built routes with her mile by mile. She thinks of losing all of it with one signature. She lifts the pen and lets it hover, then sets it down. She says she needs time to review. Kato's smile cracks. He says delay will kill his company. He says she is letting strangers win. Zola meets his eyes and tells him that strangers did not try to take her life's work with a pretty sentence. Silence falls. Someone coughs. Music leaks in from the terrace. Zola closes the folder and keeps her hands steady. She tells herself to trust her eyes, not promises. The room had folded in on Zola like a net when a voice cut through, calm enough to stop the chatter. It belonged to a woman standing by the doorway, not loud but impossible to ignore. She was not part of the family, at least not by name. Her posture said she had been in courtrooms and boardrooms and had learned how to hold a room without needing to raise her voice. She stepped forward, slow and deliberate, and everyone turned. Zola felt like someone had opened a window. The woman introduced herself as Ebel Okafor, a lawyer. Her accent was soft, her words clear. She did not smile. She looked at the contract, at Cato, then at Zola. She said simply, "They do not want your help. They want your empire." The sentence landed like cold water. Around the table, a few people shifted, annoyed more than surprised. Cato's jaw tightened. Her father opened his mouth and then closed it. Ebel did not wait for permission. She said she had seen this before. Families, she explained, can be loving and dangerous at the same time. Love can be used like a lever to move what is not theirs. She named small facts, the kind only a careful listener would notice. How the contract leaned toward quick control. How the language hid power under words like temporary. How the eyes around the table softened while the hands reached. Her voice was not drama. It was fact. Zola felt relief and shame at the same time. Relief because someone else saw what she saw. Shame because she had waited for someone in the room to stand with her and no one had. Ebel spoke about trustees and voting rights and share issuance in simple terms, like she was telling a story, not giving a lecture. She warned Zola that once papers were signed, reversing them could be a legal battle that takes years and money. She offered no judgment about family ties. She only asked one clear question: do you want to keep your company or not? The bluntness of the question made Zola breathe. Ebel then placed her card on the table as if it were an anchor. She said she was willing to help Zola review anything, to hold the papers, to make sure no trick could be played. For a moment the room hummed with whispered outrage and gratitude that was half-hearted. An ant hissed that a stranger should not meddle. Cato called her involvement a stunt. But some faces in the room had gone quiet, thinking. Zola looked at Ebel's steady hand and the soft lines by her eyes and felt an odd trust. The stranger had no ties here and therefore no reason to lie. She had only authority and a clear offer. In that single hour, the balance of the evening shifted. What had been a trap began, quietly and stubbornly, to look like a choice. Zola lifts the pen with hands that do not shake anymore, they are steady in a way she did not know she could be. The room waits like a held breath. Cato smiles as if the victory is already his. Her parents lean forward, certain of the outcome. Ebel sits a little back, calm, her card now a small, solid thing on the table. Zola thinks about the long road that brought her here, the nights on cold warehouse floors, the first truck she painted herself, the managers who cried when payroll arrived on time because she did not cut corners. She thinks about promises that sounded like love but felt like traps. She thinks about Cato's hollow eyes when asked for a plan. Then she signs the transfer, not to the holding company Cato prepared, but to a trust Ebel helped set up that is independent, clear, and iron-strong. The ink dries between stunned faces. Zola stands and looks at everyone. Her voice is quiet but firm. If family means using me, then I choose freedom. Even if it's with a stranger, she says. The words roll out simple and true. For a second there is no sound at all, only chandeliers and glass. Then the room erupts. Some people gasp, some sit back as if burned. Cato's face twists. He slams his palm on the table and rises like a storm. You can't do that, he spits. You sold us out. His voice breaks into a shout and then into pleading. Her mother sobs, not quietly, a raw, ugly sound, feeling betrayed in a way she cannot explain. Her father looks older by a decade. Uncles and aunties exchange furious whispers and think about honor and shame as if those words can fix a paper signed in a single hour. Kato lunges for the folder, demanding to see the clause that binds everything. Ebel stands, placing a hand on the folder like a shield and meets his anger without flinching. She explains, simply, that the trust keeps the company intact, that it protects employees, contracts, and the brand Zola built. She says the trust was created to prevent hostile takeovers disguised as family help. Kato's shout turns into a string of accusations: greed, betrayal, abandonment. He calls Zola cold. A cousin screams that she ruined the family. Zola hears it all but does not step back. She thinks of the drivers who trust her voice on the radio, of the small vendors who sleep easier because her invoices arrive on time, of the staff who had children and stayed because payroll was steady. She knows signing to Ebel's trust is not perfect. It is a fence built to hold against wolves. It is a promise to herself and to the people who depend on her. The guests spread the news like wildfire, some outraged, some admiring. Kato storms out, leaving his chair empty and his hopes in ruins. Zola stays, hands folded, feeling both the cost and the strange lightness of a woman who finally owns her choice. The moment Zola left Haruma Estate, the world split into two noises, one loud and angry and one small and sharp inside her head. At first the angry voices were close, family members calling her ungrateful, selfish, cold. Her mother's sobs turned into a lecture about shame. Her father would not meet her eyes. Cousins who once smiled now refused to answer her calls. Kato exploded online and off, shouting betrayal and revenge, promising he would make her regret it. Within hours a local blogger posted a smear titled, "Daughter Sells Out Family," and that post was copied and rewritten into a dozen timelines. People Zola had never met messaged hateful things. Some wrote that she had chosen money over blood, other messages were worse, cruel, and personal. Investors called next, their voices were careful and thin. A few put funding decisions on hold because they did not want to be tangled in a family feud. The bank asked for extra documents. Vendors who delivered parts to her warehouses wanted reassurance. Her phones filled with anxious messages from managers. At headquarters employees whispered in corridors and clustered around the small TV in the break room to watch the news. Some hands that used to lift boxes for her now trembled as they asked if payroll would still come. A few key clients paused contracts until the noise died down. Zola read every headline, each rumor like salt. She felt her stomach twist the way it had on the first night she slept on a warehouse floor. She wondered if she had made the worst mistake of her life. Alone in her office she looked at the photos on the wall, the team picture from the first year, the maps of routes she had drawn with a red pen. She thought about the drivers who trusted her and the apprentices she had hired when no one else would. For a while she could not think past the anger and the fear. Friends tried to call her, but some calls hurt because they asked if she had been selfish. Ebel's card sat on her desk like a small promise. Ebel called once, steady and blunt, telling her to breathe and to let her handle the media and the legal questions. That call was a thread Zola clung to. She held emergency meetings with her leadership team, answered questions she did not have full answers to, and tried to create calm using facts and next steps. The press kept pushing. Kato's supporters painted him as the victim. Online, conspiracy stories grew like vines. Still, in the middle of the chaos, Zola felt a strange clarity. She could lose everything or she could fight for the people who depended on the company more than they depended on family stories. The choice had already been made. Now she needed courage to live with it and strategy to fix what the noise had broken. Ebel did not rush. She moved through Zola's chaos with the calm of someone who had seen worse and fixed it. In the days after the dinner she quietly opened files, made calls, and showed Zola papers that read like a map out of a trap. She explained, in the simplest words, what the trust did and what it stopped. She told Zola she had helped other women who lost control of businesses to people they loved. These were not fairy tales or speeches. They were cases with names and dates and court wins. Ebel had money clout, legal teams, and quiet contacts in media houses who would not run stories without checking facts. She promised to use those resources, not to make noise for fame, but to protect jobs and contracts and reputation. Zola watched how Ebel worked. First, paperwork that showed the trust meant the company could not be sold or reissued to new shareholders without the trust's consent. Then Ebel's team began to dig into Cato's startup accounts. They found awkward transfers, invoices that pointed to personal expenses, and meetings where investor funds were promised for products that did not exist. Ebel did not shout. She called lawyers who knew how to trace money, accountants who could read the gaps, and regulators who would listen when evidence was clean. Zola felt both relief and anger. She had hoped Cato would find his feet, not steal investor money. The proof came slowly but clearly. Ebel organized confidential briefings with a few trusted journalists and with the investors who mattered. The story turned from gossip to fact. Investors who hesitated now wanted answers, and the answers laid out a pattern of fraud and misuse. Ebel helped Zola issue a clear statement to employees that explained the trust and promised payroll and continuity. She set up hotlines so frightened staff could get answers directly. She made sure vendors had contracts reaffirmed in writing. The legal notices that followed did not feel like revenge. They were a shield built to preserve contracts and to stop false claims. Cato tried to push back with lawyers of his own, but the evidence and the trust structure made his position weak. Regulators opened inquiries. Some investors demanded refunds or audits. The noise Cato had started with his social posts was drowned by documents and expert testimony. Slowly the headlines changed. The people who had been ready to pile on began to ask different questions. How did money move? Who signed what? Ebel stayed pragmatic. She told Zola that winning would not erase the hurt, but it would secure the jobs and the routes that kept food moving in towns and hospitals supplied. Zola watched her company stand while the truth came out. She felt gratitude for a stranger who had become a guardian, and she understood that choosing protection had not been betrayal. It was responsibility. News moved faster than gossip. At first the feeds were full of anger and old family pictures with captions that tore at Zola. Then the reporting changed. Journalists who had smelled a story started to check documents and call sources. They found the audit notes and the bank trails that Ebel's team had quietly handed to them. Stories that began as rumor turned into hard questions about missing investor money and shaky promises from Cato's company. Headlines flipped. Instead of "Daughter sells out family," papers ran pieces that said a woman had protected dozens of jobs and stopped a likely fraud. The tone shifted from personal betrayal to public praise. People who had been quick to judge now read the facts and felt a different kind of shame. Zola's family felt it first. The same relatives who had pushed her to sign now avoided her calls and looked away when neighbors spoke. Pride that had wrapped around Cato like armor melted into quiet embarrassment. He was no longer the brilliant son, he was the man whose business had collapsed under the weight of its own lies. Investors pulled money from his startup and asked for audits. Regulators opened inquiries. His backers wrote him off and the company folded when key partners cut ties. Zola watched that fall with a heavy sense of justice and a lighter sense of relief. She did not celebrate his ruin. She was careful and small in victory because she knew how easily a life could be wrecked. At the same time she felt something new growing, the space to lead without fear. With the trust protecting her company, with clients and staff reassured, and with Ebel's network still at her side, Zola moved on to the next chapter she had dreamed about for years: healthcare delivery. She saw how her logistics routes could reach clinics in towns where medicines ran out and supplies took days to arrive. She pitched the idea to partners and governments with clear numbers and a simple promise. Reliable supply, on time. Contracts followed, first small, then larger. Local clinics praised the change because vaccines, oxygen, and basic drugs began arriving when they should. Communities noticed. Stories came in from nurses and clinic managers who said the difference was real. Investors who once hesitated began to fund the expansion because it showed real impact and strong governance. Media that had turned on her now told stories of a company that used its trucks to save lives. Zola hired more drivers, trained staff for medical logistics, and put a hotline in place so clinics could ask for urgent help. Each new route felt like a small victory for the people who had believed in her from the start. In time, the tables had not only turned, they had tilted in a way that let Zola's work reach further than she ever imagined, and the same voice that once defended her became the one that led others to trust what she built. A year later the family gathered again, this time in a small house that felt quieter than Haruma Estate. Word had spread about Zola's work with clinics and how her trucks reached towns no one else did, but gossip travels slow inside family rooms. Kato came in last, shoulders thin and eyes tired. He looked nothing like the confident man who had slammed his hand on the dinner table. He had nothing left to hide behind. He sat down and spoke in a voice that sounded small even to himself. He asked for a job, anything to rebuild what he had lost. The room held its breath. Some relatives wanted to throw the decision back to old loyalties. Others kept silent, remembering their own mistakes. Zola watched him closely. She felt the anger from the year before like a bruise. She remembered the sleepless nights, the threats, the messages, the fear in her team when payroll wavered. She also remembered the drivers who trusted her and the nurses who called in the night to say a delivery had saved a life. She thought about how easy it would be to punish him, to make him pay in public the way he had tried to take her life's work in private. Instead she chose something quieter and harder. She met his eyes and spoke without drama. She said, "This is what family means, earning your place." She offered a role that would require him to prove himself, a job on the road with clear targets and checks, the kind of work that builds trust slowly and cannot be faked. Kato accepted with a gratitude that looked like relief and shame mixed together. He did not bow his head and crawl. He showed up, made the calls, learned the routes, and started to earn small trust again. The relatives watched as he changed by degrees, not by one grand apology but by steady work. Zola did not gloat. She stood tall because she had chosen protection over revenge and responsibility over spectacle. In the end people admired her not only for her success but for the strength it took to walk away and the wisdom to open a door when it finally mattered.